Longevity is in this quantum shift. The medical community is really hasn't embraced that longevity is even something that, anti-aging is even something that we can do, right? They tend to focus on Alzheimer's, a disease of aging, or arthritis, a disease of aging, or dementia, right? Or cardiovascular disease or cancers. All of these are diseases of aging. They increase as we age. And the book Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to by David Sinclair was really a lobbying to the medical community to say, like, if we just address aging, then we're not splitting the dollars between all of these things that are actually have aging as a root cause. We're actually addressing the thing that's causing all of these.
Are you curious about discovering ways of making your life better? Then welcome to my podcast. I'm Bob Nickman, and this is The Exploding Human. Listen in while I talk with all kinds of people in the fields of personal growth, health and healing, alternative therapies, psychology, spirituality, environment, and the future. I'm looking for those answers that make life better for everyone. You'll meet cutting-edge practitioners, doctors, artists, filmmakers, business people, and those who have overcome challenges. The brave, the curious, anyone who is out there helping us humans to explore, expand, and explode.
Hey, welcome to The Exploding Human. My name is Bob Nickman. My guest today is Chris Burres, and we're going to be talking about longevity, biohacking, and his Longevity Health Summit. This is Chris's second visit to The Exploding Human. He is a research engineer and a scientist whose primary mission is to help people live longer, healthier, pain-free lives. Chris has a diverse background in the fields of invention, manufacturing, and internet technology. He is the founder of a company called My Vital C, and among other things, we're going to be talking about the guests he has for his Longevity Health Summit. It's a wide variety of top thought leaders in the fields of health, biohacking, and longevity, and he's going to explain all that to you. And we're also going to talk about his book and the research he did for that, Live Longer and Better. So here he is. This is Chris Burres. Well, here we are, Chris. Your second interview here on The Exploding Human. Happy to see you. Things have been happening. We got a lot to talk about.
Yes, I'm excited to be back. Thank you so much for having me, Bob. And some stuff that I was not anticipating to happen has happened, and people want to hear about it.
And we're going to, before we do that, which I want to make sure people remember it, so I'm going to wait a little bit to talk about this summit that you're doing. Let's talk about your company, because I am should I call myself a client? I guess I am. I guess I am.
Client, a fan, a client.
A client. I actually take My Vital C, which is an interesting product. If we're into the world of biohacking here, which is always exciting, futuristic, yes, even though the future is now. Yeah. And you wound up, well, just do a brief thing of how, I know you've said it a million times because you get it out there, but what is My Vital C and ESS 60 and how you kind of fell into this thing, not even anticipating becoming somebody who's into the health field?
Yeah, I think the theme of the show today is going to be like, well, I didn't intend that to happen, and it did. And then I didn't intend that to happen, and it did. And then I didn't intend that. It's going to be a repeating theme. So back in 1985, three scientists here in Houston discovered this molecule. I'm actually holding up a molecule of the molecule. If you're just listening, imagine a soccer ball where the lines on the soccer ball represent the bonds between the carbon atoms. So you have a spherical molecule of 60 carbon atoms. By the way, I have a little bit of a cough. I also have a cough button on my microphone. So if I just go dead quiet for any second, it's because I'm saving your ears. You're welcome. So the molecule was discovered in 85, Nobel Prize in 96. I started manufacturing that molecule with my business partner in 1991. The molecule's amazing for industrial applications. So amazing ink, batteries, tires, photocells, all these amazing industrial applications. And my business partner and I have been selling to research institutions around the world since 1991. In 2012, they published the results. They actually thought for various reasons that this molecule, the soccer ball shaped molecule, we call it ESS 60, would be toxic, and they put it in a toxicity study. I mean, this doesn't really sound like a great supplement story, right? Like,
no. When I first heard it, I was like, okay, now what's going on? I'm going to eat a tire and a battery? What's going on? He's coughing. He's coughing.
I feel like I'm eating tires and batteries and then trying to cough them up right now. Yeah, so it just the picture is doesn't seem to be destined for a supplement. So they put it in this toxicity study, and actually my company, my lab, provided the material to the study. We're actually mentioned in that study. We are the foundations of this industry. We're the oldest and longest manufacturer of ESS60 on the planet. And instead of being toxic, it turned out that the test subjects given our molecule, in this case, the test subjects were Wistar rats, lived 90% longer than the control group. So the single longest longevity experimental result in history, and that's peer-reviewed published research, and that's the kind of research that you would hang your hat on if you're, if you're a biohacker and you're deciding, hey, this is something that I want to take. In fact, biohackers were the first ones to really jump on board. My business partner and I, we're conservative nanomaterial scientists. We're like, I'm not sure I want to be in the supplement industry. We'll just call it challenged. Maybe that's a politically correct way to describe it. And at the time, we're delivering commercial quantities carbon nanomaterials to research institutions. Very different than selling a supplement to kind of end users. And really, for about 4 years, we kind of stayed out of it. We weren't interested in getting into the industry. And then finally, somebody with a big YouTube following started talking about all the benefits they were getting, taking it on a daily basis. And our phone went from ringing 2 times a week to 10 times a day. And we're like, this is an entrepreneurial opportunity that we really need to embrace. Additionally, we had already noticed in that kind of industry that there were people who were manufacturing a similar product that didn't have the stringent constraints on it, the QA, QC that we would have as a lab. And we really decided to get into it and help keep the consumer safe. So that was my journey into a longevity health supplement. By the way, the next best way to live longer is calorie restriction. If you restrict your calorie consumption by 30%, you can extend your life by 30%. I call that the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet. Nobody signs up for, I don't know if that's something that you would sign up for, Bob, but nobody signs up for the starve yourself 1/3 to death diet.
Not much. It's not delicious. It's not. It's the.
For most, it's a hard pass. Like I'm just going to pass on that. What's the point of living longer if I can't, enjoy a normal amount of food? And we're not even talking the American diet, right? The SAD diet, standard American diet. We're talking about 30% reduction of calories from what you're supposed to be eating appropriately. So it is really a phenomenal result. It's a phenomenal supplement. And now I'm kind of thrust into this longevity space. The first thing I'm trying to answer is, well, like, why did these rats live longer? Like, what is the mechanism? We know that we're a great antioxidant, 172 times more powerful than vitamin C. And that's one ad hoc study out there on the web. There's a peer-reviewed published paper that shows us to be 125 times more powerful than vitamin C. So some pretty phenomenal results in terms of antioxidant. As it goes related to anti-inflammatory, those are the 2 things that the medical community says are causes of aging, inflammation and oxidation. So great, we're ticking the oxidation box. With inflammation, the FDA has some tight constraints, and we're allowed to say that we address inflammation associated with exercise-induced inflammation. So we've all had a tough workout or maybe just walked longer than normal and felt that inflammation the next day. We absolutely address that. The FDA doesn't yet allow us to say we address other types of inflammation because those types of inflammation are associated with the chronic diseases of aging, like Alzheimer's and arthritis and cardiovascular disease and some cancers. Or most cancers. And so we just have more research before we can actually positively say that we address that kind of chronic inflammation. So this thrusts me into this kind of longevity space. I don't know if you have any questions. I can probably keep going.
Well, keep going for now. I don't really have any questions because you're just catching the audience up to mostly what I've heard from you, but it's
I can never hear it too much because I need to be reminded of these things. I got a clogged brain, it's got a lot of data running around in there. A hard drive.
I know of a product that you might want to take to help you with that. All right. So now I'm thrust in the longevity space. I'm trying to figure out why our product works in the longevity space. What is the longevity space all about? And what is this biohacking space all about? Because the reality is in the early days, it was just those wacky biohackers. By the way, I can call them affectionately wacky because I am officially wacky. I literally just injected some BPC 157, which is a peptide, and TB 500, which is another peptide, moments ago. So I am in this realm of wacky biohacker. And so now I'm kind of navigating the space, and I'm reading books. I'm learning about sleep because one of our most consistent testimonial. Let me just share this. Our most consistent testimonial is people take it in the morning. They report mental focus and energy during the day, and then better sleep that night. So sleep being so consistent, we got to dig into sleep. Like, how important is sleep? Like, we all know, from a large framework, hey, sleep's really important. It's good for your mental, physical, and emotional well-being. And yet we still forego. We're the only creatures on the planet, by the way, that will forego sleep for no useful purpose. Like, the only real useful purposes for, extending the species is to find a mate, to find food, or to avoid getting eaten by something, right? And that's the only reasons that other creatures, every other creature on the planet, will miss sleep. We will miss sleep, to go dancing or whatever.
Well,
I love dancing.
That is ostensibly to find a mate. So
I think that's true. But there's also situations where you found a mate and your buddies found a mate and you're staying up late drinking whatever, beer, wine, whatever. You're not looking for a mate. You're not ticking any of those boxes. Although, we could argue you are solving the problems of the world. We've all been there, and I'm not opposed to those occasions. It's just like, it's not useful for your health, actually, and maybe your mental health a little bit. So here I'm digging into the sleep. I'm digging into Dr. David Sinclair's book, Lifespan: Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. And anytime I've ever kind of accumulated information that people around me don't have, I've tried to come up with a way to share that information with people around me, people that I have contact with. So I ended up writing a book. The book's called Live Longer and Better. It really is the story. The tagline is, your journey to living longer and better has never been more achievable than today. And it starts really digging deep into longevity and biohacking. And then I ended up, and kind of the reason we're talking today is I have been able to execute a longevity health summit, right? So it's called Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms. I've interviewed 55 experts in longevity, including some pretty famous people that you recognize. So, and maybe these are some that you recognize. Dave Asprey, he's the father of biohacking. He created Bulletproof Coffee. Most people have heard of Bulletproof Coffee. Dr. Stephen Gundry, he's a 4-time New York Times best-selling author, and just amazing individual, an amazing story. He used to be a pediatric thoracic heart surgeon, and gave that up to really start educating people and treating patients with great nutrition, with logical nutrition. So great stuff there. Ben Greenfield, I think he's written some 17 books. He is just a wealth of knowledge on everything biohacking, everything really health. And is an amazing personal trainer. In fact, one of my other speakers is a guy named Chris Gethin, who's an amazing, has an amazing physique and is an amazing trainer. And they did an event together. And I saw a meme. Chris Gethin was like, I have to admit, I've thrown up twice during Ben Greenfield's session. So like, these are cutting edge people that we're bringing on to this longevity summit. And I couldn't be prouder. I learned so many things. And that was kind of selfishly the first reason I did it, because I got to interview these amazing people. And probably like the same reason. I think I was listening to one of your podcasts recently where you were talking about why you do this podcast. And it was like, because I'm giving information that I wish I had at some point.
That's exactly it. Right. So, it's right. Yeah. It's like, I like to look at it as kind of a clearinghouse for people to find out things that would have taken me forever to find before this stuff got even remotely popular. So I'm talking 30 to 40 years ago when I first started on this path to finding out, better ways to live. I had to do a lot of the searching on my own, and it was just sort of in the void. And now with the internet, I like to think of that people can come here and find out about all this stuff from people like you. And, I don't have to do this tremendous amount of research. I've got the researchers coming here. It's fantastic. Keep going. Yeah. I'm excited. Yeah. Look at me. My hand went in the air.
So kind of selfishly, I get to interview these experts, and then, generously, I want to share. And there's two reasons. I've always believed that when you start to educate people, to teach people, that's when you really cement the knowledge in your own brain, right? So as I'm writing this book, I'm cementing all of this kind of longevity expertise into my brain. As I'm interviewing Gundry and Asprey and Greenfield, and Sandra Kaufman was amazing. Sergey Young, he actually hangs out with Elon Musk and Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis. They wrote a book called, Tony Robbins and Peter Diamandis wrote a book called Life Force. Sergey Young actually wrote a book, The Science and Technology of Growing Young. Like, I got to interview all these people, and now I've got the privilege of sharing all of that content with people, and it's actually free, which is pretty amazing.
So what's going to be the format? Let's say I come into this summit. I go online. We'll talk about how people can access it. I'm going to watch you interview 55 people, or people are going to talk without you too. How's that going to work?
Yeah. So, we'll give the link. You just need to give your email and your name. And then, we've got sponsors. So you'll be presented, hey, maybe you want to download this PDF. If you do, great. And then you'll get some marketing material from the sponsor. All the sponsors are amazing. I actually vetted all of the sponsors. And then each day, so it starts February 26th, goes through March 3rd. And each day there's between 7 and 8 videos that are available. And those are the videos where I interviewed these experts. So, like, a lot of them aren't necessarily experts in longevity, but I took their subject matter expertise and tied it together with longevity. So they're longevity experts because they're relevant to longevity. It's not, if you just go search longevity, Sandra Kaufman probably is maybe more of a biohacker. I'm trying to think of, I interviewed Indira, and her kind of focus is rheumatoid arthritis. Well, that's something that's associated with aging. And so, like, that's a longevity expert, and you get access to all of these people. So 7 or 8 per day, but you only do have access for that day. So there is a way that you can buy, and this is on the back end. If you want to buy access to all of these, it's only $99. And then you get access. It's like some 40 to 45 hours of expertise in the health and wellness space. And you can feel my passion that came through the interviews. For each interview, I did a minimum of an hour research, like down the rabbit holes. Mm-hmm. And when I started getting into kind of the more popular people, just because the more content, I was reading 2 of their books. I'm listening to interviews. So I did 3+ hours of preparation for Dr. Gundry, Dave Asprey, and Ben Greenfield, which, by the way, I loved every second because I'm learning stuff as I go. But it really is a concentrated, focused summit on longevity.
Yeah, and it sounds like for the price of maybe a book or 2 that you would buy, you're going to get all those hours of information that you can look at any time. Because I know I have to go back and listen to my podcast sometimes because I forget some of the things people say to me. And I'm like, what were they talking about? And how does that work? So yeah, that sounds awesome. What are some of the things that kind of blew you away about the information you discovered talking to some of these people? Is anything that just really stood out as like, I didn't know that?
Yeah, well, there are certainly a number of things. I want to start first with the thing that blows me away is that I've actually accomplished this. Right. So if 5 months ago you had said, hey, Chris, you're going to do a longevity summit. You're going to interview 55 experts in longevity. And that's going to include Ben Greenfield, Dave Asprey, and Dr. Stephen Gundry, I would have said, listen, Bob, like, I hear what you're saying. I really do like to set myself up for success, not for failure. I don't think that's something that I can accomplish. So I'm going to say no. And then everything just went into place. In fact, I'm working with a company called Health Means, and we started working together. Like, listen, you need to interview 35 to 40 people. In my head, I was like, I think I can interview 25, and then we'll figure out what happens after that. As I was interviewing people, I recognized that I had connections with people who had lots of connections, and I started leveraging all of that to get as many amazing experts into longevity. So the first amazing thing is that I even pulled this off. Like, this is awesome, and I couldn't be more proud. There were a number of things. I did a couple of really smart things. One of them was to ask each of the experts a couple of the same questions. So some of the questions were, how long do you want to live? How long can humans live? And what are 2 to 3 protocols or shortcuts that you would share about longevity, or maybe just a longer health span? And I think one of the things that was really interesting, because longevity is in this quantum shift, the medical community is really hasn't embraced that longevity is even something that, anti-aging is even something that we can do, right? They tend to focus on Alzheimer's, a disease of aging, or arthritis, a disease of aging, or dementia, right? Or cardiovascular disease, or cancers. All of these are diseases of aging. They increase as we age. And the book Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to, by David Sinclair, was really a lobbying to the medical community to say, like, if we just address aging, then we're not splitting the dollars between all of these things that are actually have aging as a root cause. We're actually addressing the thing that's causing all of these, right? So the medical community is really shifting about how we think about aging. And when I tell people, hey, test subjects that took this molecule lived twice as long, or almost twice as long. That's the ESS60 molecule. A number of people are like, well, why would I want to live longer? And the reason, it took me a while to get my head wrapped around this.
I think I asked you that when we were talking the first time.
Yeah. Why would I want to live longer? And then, and the reason for that question is because we currently cannot separate living decrepit, living in some sort of debilitated state, with aging. Yeah. Like, aging means in our mind, it equals, it's not approximately equal, it equals living infirmed, and maybe an oxygen tank, and walkers, and maybe not entirely lucid, and suffering from those diseases, Alzheimer's, arthritis, cardiovascular, those diseases of aging. So if you change the question, I'm giving you a little background so I can share this interesting thing. If you change that question to, Bob, if you had the same mental capacity that you have today, and you have the same physical capacity that you have today, would you then be interested in living longer? And for most people, that dramatically shifts how they think about the question. So one of the interesting artifacts is I asked everyone, how long do you want to live, and how long can humans live? And one thing that came out of that is only 3 people gave the same number. So think about, how long can humans live? Maybe 120. How long do you want to live? And we got a lot of, as long as I can be productive, as long as I can be contributing, which are like, I couldn't agree with more, but it wasn't a number. It wasn't, hey, humans can live to 120, and so do I. And as such, I want to live to 120. Because even in these longevity experts' mind, they still haven't extricated the equivalent of old age and infirmity.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
And so I found that extremely interesting, and shocking, frankly, right? Because you're looking at these longevity experts, and you're like, we're having these conversations, and they're aware of all the arguments that I just made, same mental capacity, same physical capacity, and then still the answer is like, yeah, just as long as I can. And that's not, I think you need to have aspirations bigger than that.
Yeah, there's that cartoonish idea that, I don't know, you've probably seen this around, where it's the old guy chasing the young secretary around the desk. he's like 85 and she's like 30, and like and people, they laugh at it because one, they don't think it's possible, but two, they'd like to be that guy. If I'm just going from a guy's point of view.
Yeah.
Like if you were that guy, why wouldn't you want to be that guy? I mean, not that you're creepy, but that you have that kind of vitality is what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the energy and the mental focus, and that's in that story. They're in the office, right? So they're still working.
Yeah.
Like that's I think a thing that's really important.
Well, when I asked you the question, why do I want to live longer? It was partly because I don't want to be infirm. Because when I noticed that the last number of years of my parents' life were a lot of physical problems, including, well, I don't even want to include them. I don't even want to talk about them. They were not great. Yeah. And it was not a comfortable or even desirable way to live. And they would tell me that. They wouldn't. I'm not just saying it from my point of view. They would say that, like, I am so done with this that I'm not sick enough to die. I'm not healthy enough to enjoy my life. And they would tell me this, and I'm like, oh, that sounds horrible. But if they were vital,
see you next week.
Yeah, right. Well, yeah, I think the average number of people in like a assisted living, they're taking like 20 pills a day. And pills to counteract pills. It's just, this idea of, dependence on machines and pills and all this stuff sounds horrible. I mean, it is horrible. I mean, it doesn't sound, it is, it sucks. I mean, like, why would you want that? But if you're going to be living to, 100, let's just pick 100, because that's a magical number, but it's vital. That would be amazing. That would be, I don't see anything wrong with that. That seems really great. Unless you're somebody that, we'll talk about it on the emotional side or the mental side. Like, I'm bored with life. I just don't like it anymore. It's not that much fun. But half of that, or more than half of that, is because if you don't feel well, that is how you're going to look at things. But if you feel well, you're probably going to be like, oh, I can actually maybe get some stuff done that most people don't have time in life to do.
One of the speakers gave this example, because you're talking about like the latter part, and apparently I'm constantly researching, whether it's YouTube videos on 2X, right, or reading articles, peer-reviewed publications. Apparently it's approximately 20% of your life is in this state of decline right now, right? And that's not interesting. And this one speaker gave the example that their uncle, who liked to drink and liked to smoke, was having a conversation with their doctor. And the doctor was like, hey, listen, if you keep drinking and smoking, you're going to lose like 15 years of your life. And the uncle was like, well, is that going to be the last 15? Because I don't really want those last 15 anyway. So
it'll definitely it'll be the last 15, but it's the last several that you're alive. How are those going to be? That's whatever exactly. That is. If it's 15, but the 5 before that are crap. Now it's 20 years.
Yeah, exactly. No, it just, because that's where a lot of people fit, right? They're like, I don't want to be infirmed. I want to be, but if I can be vital and healthy, and have the mental acuity and contribute and spend time with my kids and my grandkids and maybe even my great grandkids. I mean, that could be a source of problems for some people, but there's a lot. I think there's a lot to do. And even before this summit, when I would ask that question, if you had the same mental capacity and the same physical capacity, some people said no. And I think, I originally was going to write a book called Reinvent Yourself as if you're going to live forever, because you might, because there's a lot of, like, if you change your mindset, then there's a lot of joy that you can extract. And that's a change of mindset. And in fact, one of the things that I asked every one of the experts was, give me 2 to 3 protocols, mindsets, let's call them shortcuts, about longevity that you would share, about a longer health span that you would share. And we kind of aggregated the data, and I think this is pretty interesting. So 33% of them shared sleep, 52% shared exercise, and we're actually going to go back and break this into 2 pieces, because there's exercise and there's movement. And I think everybody would agree that there needs to be movement, and you don't necessarily have to exercise vigorously. It's probably good for you, but you don't have to be busting out your, to working to improve your VO2 max. Although an improved VO2 max tends to be a great indicator of longevity. Muscle mass is definitely a great indicator of longevity. So we were thinking about breaking those two out. Diet, 52%. Mindset was 46%. So remember, sleep 33, mindset 46. And my first reaction to this was like, well, sleep's more important than mindset, right? Like, just like sleep is good for your physical, mental, and emotional well-being. If you're not getting enough sleep, and by the way, this comes from Dr. Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep, which unfortunately does not have the tagline, and why we don't have to. That would be nice, because to get those extra 8 hours. But that book is amazing and talks about all the detrimental things you have. So I was kind of instantly convinced sleep should have been higher. I'm surprised. But then when you start thinking about the mindsets that you and I are talking about right now, like, I don't have the mindset to live longer. I have the mindset to drink and smoke, so I don't have to experience my last 15 years. I don't have the mindset to make a change. Dr. Gundry, this is actually a pretty cool story. He said one of his patients is a founder of one of the social media companies, and he shared he was just pain, like he was just experiencing pain. Came in, went through Gundry's typical kind of assessment, and Gundry was like, here are the things you need to give up. And one of them was eggs. And this patient was like, I can't give up eggs. I eat omelets every day. And Gundry was like, well, you're the one who's hurting. Like, you're right. You don't have to give up eggs, but eggs are part of the problem. My experience and these tests show that. So he gives up the eggs, and even that hesitation, right? That's a mindset. The mindset is, I'm in pain, but I'm going to eat the eggs anyway. Well, okay. He convinces them not to. So a number of months later, that patient comes back and says, hey, can we retest for eggs? Because I really want an omelet. And they did. And he started on egg whites. And like 3 days later, after he got the approval for an egg white omelet, he calls and says, hey, I'm in pain again. And Dr. Gundry was like, what did you do? He was like, well, I had an omelet yesterday for breakfast, and then I had one for lunch, and then I had another one for dinner. And then today I had one for breakfast and lunch, and now I'm in pain again. And, there are situations where your mindset is really important, and you may not, I think and we'll get into food and diet here in a second, but you might have to give up something, at least how frequently you have it. You probably don't need to give it up permanently. And it's not like he'll never have an omelet again, but he's never going to have omelets 3 days, 3 times a day again. And he's probably never going to have omelets 7 days a week again. That's just not gonna happen for him. And to accept that is a mindset.
Well, there's an interesting thing that I've talked about with some people, like and some nutritionists. Like, why is it the things that are the worst for us we want the most? It's a really interesting thing how the body will do that. It's counterintuitive to what you think the organism is going to do. But those cravings there's something going on. This is as much as I can figure out. There's something going on in the body. There's a deficiency or a dopamine hit that's to be had by eating these certain things, but they actually make you feel worse. But then it also has the effect of making you want more of it because it didn't satisfy it in the first place. So it's a really vicious cycle. And the most obvious one of these is sugar. Obviously, it's the worst one of them all. It lights up the brain in, a billion areas, and it's delicious. And you get an initial, buzz off of it. And then there's the B side, which is just horrible. At least it was for me. It took me a while to get off of, white sugars and those kinds of things. As much as I knew what they were doing, like you say, I don't want to, but I want to enjoy, but am I enjoying? Because I'm not, because the B side is kicking my ass.
Yeah. Yeah. How are your sugar cravings now?
I don't really have them.
Yeah. So, this is where, the answer is actually pretty straightforward. So there's a vagus nerve between your brain and your stomach. And 90% of the communication happens from your stomach to your brain. So your stomach telling your brain what to do, your stomach telling your brain what it wants. So you have these bacteria in your stomach. And if you feed them sugar, the bacteria that love sugar the most grow the most. And then those bacteria are doing the little, pulling doing the puppeteering and going, we're a lot of us down here and we're really hungry. And the thing we want is sugar. And so then you crave sugar. And this happened to me in the middle of the pandemic. A lot of people were gaining weight. I actually went on Dr. Gundry's protocol and lost 20 pounds and had no cravings, right? Like right away I did, certainly, but the cravings went away because you got your gut, because I got my gut into balance. And so then what's actually thriving in my gut are things that crave the good stuff because I've done the good stuff long enough. Now it's a pain, and I still love a sweet, right? I have this kind of barrier between me and overindulgence with sweets, which is I get one small bar, square of dark chocolate and one small square of milk chocolate every night. Like that's my routine to end the night. That's my dessert.
And you can,
that is
yeah, you
the
can
thing
stop
that prevents
too.
me from having cheesecake.
You're able to stop.
Say it again. Yeah.
Okay.
Because I can be done with it, and it's it's not even 100 calories, and it's not that sweet. So, and chocolate's chocolate is actually cacao is good for you. So that's really what's driving things is this gut bacteria. One of the fascinating things that I learned, I don't know if this was in an interview or just doing the research, is that we are born 99% human, meaning all the cells that make us up, 99% of those cells are human. There's some bacteria cells that kind of make us up. But as you sit here today, you're actually 90% bacteria in terms of cell count. So you have, in terms of bacterial cell count versus human cell count, you're 90% bacteria and 10% human.
And that's supposed to be that way, or is it there's something?
Yes.
Okay. It feels like it.
That's because your gut biome. Okay, so your human cells are bigger than your bacterial cells that are in your gut, but there's more gut bacteria cells than human cells to the degree of 90 to 10. So those bacteria, and we're just now finding. I think this was amazing. There's a product by Pendulum called Akkermansia, and it's a gut bacteria, and it's responsible for, you've got a mucus lining in your stomach, and so it's responsible for breaking it down and rebuilding it, right? So it's, imagine the Golden Gate Bridge. They have to paint like every 7 years, and they paint every 7 years, so they have to they just keep restarting. That's the Akkermansia as it relates to the paint called mucus on your stomach lining. They didn't discover that, I think it's until about 2005, that bacteria even existed, because as soon as that bacteria gets exposure to oxygen, it dies. So the way you understand what's in your feces is you cultivate it, and Akkermansia never cultivates because you're always cultivating in oxygen. It was actually the fact that we sequenced the genome that they were able to say, oh, wait, there's a bacteria here, and we've never seen it before, but here the bacterial remnants of it, I mean, the DNA remnants of it are everywhere. So then they start figuring out that they have to cultivate this bacteria in the absence of oxygen. And this is a supplement that's now available on the market. And a lot of people who are in decline have a lack of Akkermansia in their system.
That would make total sense. The two things that come up the most in this show for, health reasons are the gut microbiome and trauma. That's on the emotional, mental and emotional side. And those two things, and like you said, you were talking about the mental attitude. So those two things in conjunction seem to be the root of most issues and most solutions, which I find that really interesting. It's like what goes on between my ears and what goes on in my gut. And the fact that you just talked about the connection between the two, the communication. I was
really important.
Yeah, I was going to an acupuncturist who's also an energy healer type person, and she discovered. She took some classes in this, but most of where she puts the needles now is around the gut. She doesn't even mess around with other areas unless there's a specific thing, but sort of for an overall health thing, that's what she does. And that's what she studies in terms of the energy around what's going on in the gut, which I found really interesting. And you know what? When I got it from the table from those treatments, I felt amazing. Really
Yeah.
felt amazing. I was like, man, I mean, and you don't really even feel the needles in that area because it's so thick around there,
Yeah. Yeah.
especially when
No,
you're
and
cut like I am, Chris. My six pack is like just off the charts.
it's around somewhere. Mine's around somewhere. I'm working on it though. So here's a little bit of irony in my life, and then I'm actually kind of going back and revisiting the content of the experts that I interview.
Awesome.
Which is I interviewed 55 experts in longevity, so in health and longevity. And the diet I follow is an entrepreneur by the name of Alex Hormozi. I don't know if you've seen him. He's blowing up social media. He created a company called Gym Launch, sold it for, I think, $42 million, is working on building $1 billion business and documenting the whole thing. And he's a super, super smart guy. He and his wife actually are brilliant. And he has had he was in the gym business, but he's pretty swole, right? Like, you know, he's probably weighs what you and I do together. But he's had a six pack for 20 years, built multi-million-dollar businesses within those 20 years, and eats cookies every day. And so that was the check box for me, right? Can I have a six pack? Can I do it while I'm busy growing a business? And can I have a cookie every now and then, right? And his focus is just protein. Just get enough protein. So I start that, and then I start going, well, let me go back and look at the experts, because this wasn't a particular focus, although I did ask Dave Asprey in his initial book. He was talking about a protein content, a recommendation of about 0.6 grams of protein per pound of weight that you have. And then now in his most recent book, which is Smarter Not Harder, it's 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. And that's the exact same number as Alex Hormozi. He's like, I've got simple equations. And I love the way he does his videos. He's like, if you want a healthy video, go somewhere else. I'm just going to tell you what I do and what I've been doing for 20 years. And so it's 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight. In my case, I'm 170. So I'm having 170 grams of protein a day. It works out to be about 1.2 pounds of lean turkey a day. It is a lot of I feel like I'm not hungry. I am actually doing intermittent fasting, so I'm hungry for about an hour and a half, 2 hours before I actually eat my first overwhelming helping of turkey.
Yeah.
But that is my focus. And when I go back and look at the data from most of the experts that I interviewed, that is the right target. 1 gram of, but now here's the reason. We actually, every muscle cell in our body is replenished every 3 months, right? That turns out to be about 300 grams a day. And we need to be getting this 300 grams when we're younger, like into our kind of early 20s. Our body is really good at taking the existing muscle cells, breaking them down, using those amino acids, reprocessing them, and reforming those cells, in addition to the protein that we're consuming. But as we cross that threshold, we get significantly worse at it, which sounds like a recipe for you're never going to have that musculature again. But it can be made up for by protein consumption, right? And you still have to work out, like your body just doesn't, I mean, you're replenishing the muscles, but your body doesn't grow muscles without the hormetic stresses of actually lifting
some
weights
resistance.
and that kind of stuff.
I understand that. Yeah. Wow, this is really fascinating stuff. And I want to go back to the 2 things you said, because we didn't get to talk about it. Exercise and movement. You were talking about that, and you said you wanted to talk a little bit more about it. Now I want to hear about it, because I completely forgot until I remembered.
Yeah. So the example that I gave, and I was on a podcast recently and was talking about this. I love to do sprints. Like sprints, one of the things that I enjoy the most in terms of working out. And the sprints that I'm trying to do is as fast as I can. And actually, Some of this is driven by Dave Asprey. Dave Asprey really focuses on sprint like a lion's chasing you and then lay down, right? So that you get this sense of calm and relaxation, get up and sprint and lay down. And I've always done for quite a while, done sprint routines. And I ended up in probably in the last 6 months, I've had strains, muscle strains from sprints. So one of my my right quad, one of my right hamstring, one of my left quad. And I figure if I do one more, then I'll be balanced and then I can get to sprinting and I don't have to worry about it. But you don't have to do that, right? Like I enjoy it and it's good for muscle development. But you don't have to be pushing yourself that hard. There was a time, so I played soccer in college. I played semi-professional soccer out of college. And my go-to routine jog, if I'm going to go out and go run, was 3 miles. And what that ended up being kind of coming into pandemic was about 2 times a week, I'd go for a 3-mile jog. And in the middle of pandemic, my wife is going every day, but she's just going 2 miles, right? So about 20 minutes she's jogging. And part of me was like, well, I can do 20 minutes and I should do 20 minutes every day. So now instead of jogging twice a week, I'm jogging every day. I'm jogging or doing resistance training now every single day. So I use that example as, and I didn't even finish the muscle tear. I'll come back to that. I use that example as whatever movement you're doing now, or if you're not doing any movement, go do 5 minutes, right? Like, and there's memes out there, little videos that say, at least get dressed. And when you get dressed, go do 1 minute. And then you're not just going to do 1 minute, but don't make it so daunting that you quit. It's more important that you move every day than it is that you move for 1 complete hour, right? That muscle, that hormetic stress that you can put on your body happening every day, and not necessarily to the point of soreness, but even just doing 5 minutes, 10 minutes, the goal should be 20. But if you can, if 5 is the thing that causes you to do it every day, do that, right? Whatever it is. And that's really kind of the focus on movement. Then you look at exercise. As I was preparing for the interview with Dave Asprey, I found a video on Mind Valley, a massive kind of organization, great speakers, great content. And Dave showed off his 6-pack. And he said, in order to get the 6-pack, I work out 15 minutes a week. So 15 minutes a week, he's got a 6-pack. And it's because he's doing things different. And that's one of the reasons that I think it's important to follow what Dave Asprey is doing. He's actually working on, I'm trying to remember, he's got a franchise of locations where you can actually go and use the same equipment that he uses. And there's resistance training that is very unique. It allows your body, there's a thing called proprioception. So if you pick up a dumbbell, right, you know that at some point you're going to wiggle the dumbbell, and your body, your brain knows that it can handle the wiggle, right, to manage that momentum when it wiggles. Because of that, it won't let you pick up a heavier weight. So you may be able to, like, say, maybe do a dumbbell bench press with 100 pounds in each hand, but it won't let you pick up more than 70, because if it moves, if you have that movement perception, proprioception, you've got to be able to manage it, and your brain won't even allow you to pick up the weight. The equipment that he's using, you push on it, and if you relax, there's no pushback, right? So you can push this direction, right? You can push away, but when you pull back, it doesn't push back against you. So there's no proprioception. There's no concept of, you're not perceiving any motion in the negative direction. So you're actually able to exert significantly more force. I found that to be absolutely amazing. And I'm looking forward to getting on a piece of equipment like that.
So you're tricking your brain. It tricks your brain into thinking it can handle something that it otherwise might not. But it doesn't mean you're going to get hurt. It just means you can
do a lot more. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, and then to go back to kind of my muscle tears, one of them that I had as I was running, my first thought was, oh man, I'm not going to be able to work out at all. I mean, I'm going to have to just like do curls because I'm not going to be able to walk. And I pushed myself. So I took one day off. The next day I went on a bike ride, simple, easy bike ride, but I wanted to get the blood flowing. because that blood flow is where the healing happens. Without blood flow, you don't heal. With blood flow, you do heal. And so on that bike ride, it was about every 10th pedal that I would accidentally use my quad to pull up on the pedal. And I would be like, okay, don't do that. But that was a better decision than like, oh, I'm injured, so let me sit out for 3 days.
Yeah, I have the same kind of thing. I had a tight back. I don't know what happened. You could feel it in the middle back, the muscles. But I went to yoga today anyway, and I just did it. I couldn't do exactly what I can normally do, but I thought, well, isn't it better to just heat up and move than just to sit around going, ow,
Yes.
And so I didn't push, but I went. So I feel pretty good right now. I mean, we'll see what tomorrow brings, but I think it's, I've worked through several things that way where I just don't stop, but I don't push. And that's really, speaking of the mental aspect, I don't know if I guess this has a little bit to do with what they're talking about, or actually a lot, is when I'm too competitive with myself and I don't take it in a way that is sort of long goal living, that's when I screw myself up. I don't feel right, but like today I went, you don't have to keep up with the rest of the people in this room. Just do what your body is telling you. And because it's not a competition certainly not with them, but even with myself. Oh, you could do this last week. Do it now. Well, I can't do it right now. It's a different.
Yeah. Listen to your body.
Yeah.
I had something recent. I'd been feeling under the weather, and I was probably halfway through my jog. So again, it's just 2 miles. And I think I'd done one sprint and was considering doing another one. I was like, you know what? I'm tired. I'm worn out. I've been, on the edge of being under the weather. I'm fighting, like what I realized is I'm fighting something, a bacteria or a virus or whatever. It hadn't kind of really manifested, but I was smart enough to listen to my body and I just walked home. Like, that's fine. I'm going to walk home today and then we'll be back at it tomorrow, whatever it is. And it might be just a walk. It might be just a simple, I call them like a Pee Wee Herman ride, a bike ride, right? Or I just have this picture in his movie, like he's like waving at everyone.
Right,
It's not about physical fitness, but it is, right? It's about health.
Now you mentioned eggs, and there was something that somebody sent me yesterday about how eggs aren't good for you. But I've also heard that they are good for you. That's the thing about these health things that I find very confusing sometimes. And I think everyone's a little bit different. So I think that's where the different, but it's like never eat eggs. There was the whole cholesterol thing, and don't eat eggs, they're bad. And then other people say, well, you eat eggs, and actually the best part is the yellow part in the yolk in an organic, wonderfully raised egg. So what is it? I mean, how do you think people determine what they should do and what they shouldn't do? Because there's conflicting messages about almost everything that's considered healthy. I mean, I interviewed some carnivore guys who are telling me plants are toxic. All plants are toxic. That's what they're telling me. And I'm like, I don't, not that you can't ever eat them if you need to, but they don't eat it. They don't eat any plants. Yeah, but I listened to them. I was interested. I was fascinated. They look pretty robust. So who am I to say?
Yeah, I bump into that regularly as I've been on this journey. And there's a book, Saladini, I think, is a book called The Carnivore Code, which is compellingly written. So good. He's a smart guy, able to write compelling content. There is good data that you need fiber, and that fiber comes from plants. Dr. Gundry's premise is that plants, because they can't move, and this probably came up in that podcast with him, because they can't move, all they have is chemical defense. So they create these chemical defenses to protect them from insects. It's even the reason my background is engineering. So when I first heard about GMO, genetically modified organisms, I'm like, they're modifying them so that we have more of them, so we have more food. But then when I was kind of going down this path, what they're doing in these modifications is they're making them more insect resistant, so that when insects eat them, insects feel uncomfortable, bloated, whatever. the things that we feel when we eat the wrong thing, and then they stop eating them. Well, then now, like, we're animals, insects, animals. So now those same proteins that are being enhanced in these GMOs we're consuming. So I think you do need to be very careful with plants, right? And plant components. And you also have oxalates, which I think can be managed just by with a little bit of cheese. But the reality is everybody's different. And this also came out. A lot of people think in terms of food allergies, right? So you go get all the pricks on your arm and like, oh, I'm allergic to broccoli, but it looks like a little bit red for XYZ. The reality is it's your food sensitivities that are the problem. And there's a lot more sensitivities than you tend to realize. Dr. Gundry said he sees patients 6 days a week. And he said that 100% of the patients that come to him have wheat antibodies in their system. So in their bloodstream. So basically, wheat proteins have gotten through their stomach lining, which aren't supposed to get through their stomach lining, and have caused antibodies to be formed to fight these wheat proteins. And that's indicative of a food sensitivity. They don't have full-blown celiac disease. Gluten is not, a key allergen to them, but they are sensitive to it, and it's causing these problems. In fact, he just came out with his book called Gut Check. I was able to get an early copy of it. So my questions to him were about Gut Check. In that book, I think it's 106 times he mentions leaky gut. He's like, leaky gut equals leaky brain. Leaky gut equals leaky bones. Leaky gut equals leaky heart. And I was like, literally my question in the interview was like, all right, Gundry, we get it. Leaky gut, not good. What's causing it? How do we manage it? All that stuff. And it really boiled down to understanding your food sensitivities. Like in the case of that social media guy, where eggs was one of his food sensitivities. So the ones that tend to be on the top are going to be lectins, like gluten is the main one right now. But there's a lot of other lectins in wheat, and then dairy, and then eggs. And so those are the top three, I think, that he looks at the most. You really need to go do a food sensitivity test and understand what you're sensitive to, because there may be something that you really like that is really not good for you.
You can almost count on it. Right? I mean, yeah. It was interesting. I did a DNA test, not a 23andMe, not ancestral.
Yeah.
But literally my DNA in every area, mood and behavior, cardio, all the areas of health. It was really an interesting thing to see the readouts of what, and one of the interesting things, and this wasn't me, but there's people who should not be doing cardio. They aren't genetically programmed for success with cardio. In fact, it can be detrimental, which you wouldn't think. So there is no across the board kind of a thing for people, and I even found out some stuff in mood and behavior readouts of my genes that made sense to my behavior. It totally lined up. I mean, it's like, it almost makes you question, like, well, there is no such thing as free will. I mean, you're coming in as this biologically programmed organism, and you can go pretty far in certain directions, but you can't go too far. There's ranges for what you're able to do, and some are you're not going to be as successful at things just by your genetics. You're just not going to be able to do certain things, and you are going to be able to thrive in other areas.
And that's what's necessary for the survival of the species, right? Is that people have skills in different tasks. And I love the twin studies that they'll do where twins who have been separated at birth have similar speaking manner. Like they just are very similar. There's a lot that is, programmed into our genes that we're not aware of.
But you can, when you get this information, you can sort of narrow down the things that are probably best for you in food, in certain behaviors and ways to supplement. I mean, we're talking some fine tuning here, but I think it's we're in terms of longevity, even I think it's where the science is going, is the information that's going to be available because of all the ways we've been able to map the human mind and the human body. It's really it's unbelievable.
So let me blow your mind. In 1950, medical information doubled every 50 years.
Yeah.
Today, it doubles every 73 days.
I didn't know the actual statistics, but I remember seeing a lecture by Kurzweil about this, about how quickly information doubles now. It's I like to say it's every 15 minutes, but it's not quite that often, but quite that soon. But it's pretty phenomenal when you think about what are some of the, he actually predicted, I think it's generous, but that immortality before the end of in the next 25 years, something like that. I don't think that doesn't seem realistic to me, but I don't know how fast we're going to be able to do stuff. I don't even know if I want to be immortal. Talk about longevity.
Well, if you have the same mental capacity that you have today, Bob, and you had the same physical capacity that you have today, would you then be interested in living as forever?
Well, my answer is this. Too many assholes. I can't take it.
Well, that's a different scenario. We're not promising a license to kill assholes. That is not included in this infinite longevity. Because one, we've all been an asshole at some point.
He doesn't talk about none of these guys talk about the A factor. I just made that up.
that has not been brought up.
Well,
by the way, medical information doubling every 73 days. That's a new statistic. Doesn't even include AI. Right? AI is so new that's not incorporated into that. And actually, I used AI to do a quick calculation based on this speed of increase. How, like in 10 years, information will be doubling in 15 minutes. Right. So, So when you think about, and then we'll go back to first principles and maybe it's time to wrap up. But when you think about, and this is in Dr. David Sinclair's book, Lifespan, Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to, that you can take any one of your cells and you can clone it and you can make a baby Bob from any one of your cells. So every cell in your body has the information to be younger. The premise in Lifespan is we just got to figure out how to pull the levers so that we can walk you back, or that we can at least make sure you're not aging forward. And I think that's a compelling argument for the fact that it's possible. In my mind, it's a fact. And then you throw in how quickly information is doubling, and it happens a lot faster than we realize.
Well, it raises some interesting social philosophical questions, like who decides who's going to be able to do that, and then what about new people, because we're not going to really need them if everybody can go forever, and and then now we're going against a biological imperative that people have to reproduce themselves. It's a really fascinating kind of conundrum that we're going to be facing. Probably a different podcast, but it's every solution has another issue that comes up for it. So I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I like that.
I brought two speakers who are one's somewhat relevant to it and one's directly relevant to it. Paul Nash, Dr. Paul Nash has a PhD in geriatrics, and was just talking about like what our mindsets are about geriatric people. Like, how do we think of them? How do we perceive them? How do they perceive themselves? What does a geriatric sex life look like? Like, this was a fascinating conversation. And then the other one that's kind of a little more relevant to what you said, I actually interviewed. So the co-author of my book is a Dr. Jerome Corsi. He's a 2-time New York #1 bestseller, which is a hard thing to accomplish. And he's had a career in politics. He's had a career in he's worked as a consultant for terrorism against, obviously. He's had just different.
He's against it.
Yeah.
How did you meet this guy?
Yeah. There's a few out there. And so he's in a unique position, and he's written, I don't know, like 40 books or something, just on all sorts of different topics. And he can be fairly controversial, but I felt he was in a unique position to sit down and kind of pontificate with him the ramifications of living forever. And so that's one of the interesting talks that's actually on the summit.
Okay, I can't wait to see that one, because I get all twisted up with that stuff. It's and I've talked about it on one of my shows about AI and what are the ramifications of it. And I'm not the first, obviously, or the only. I mean, everyone's talking about what's going to happen, so we don't know. There's a lot of good stuff's going to happen, and there's a lot of sort of iffy arenas. But that's not why we're here today. We're here to promote and educate people and find out how they can go to the summit. So as we're ending this thing, let's lay out the information of how people can do this.
Excellent. So to find the book, and by the way, there's a charity aspect to the book that I want to share. You can buy the book. It's like $20. The website's livelongerandbetterbook.com. And if you opt for a signed copy, so I'll sign it, that's $10. That entire $10 goes to OR, Operation Underground Railroad. They recently had a movie out called The Sound of Freedom. You may have seen it. It made a big splash. It's about fixing child sex trafficking, which I'm also for, fixing child sex trafficking. I'm against terrorism and for fixing child sex trafficking. And so for the signature, that entire $10 is donated to them. On that same site, there is a link to the Uncovering the Secrets of Longevity, Live Beyond the Norms Health Summit. Again, it is 100% free. It starts February 26th, ends March 3rd. So it starts February 26th, ends March 3rd. You have, just for your email and your name, you have access to all of the videos, all of the 55 people that I interviewed. If you miss something, $100, you can get, unending access to all of those videos. And then if anybody's interested in trying my product, this thing that kind of thrust me into the longevity space, responsible for the single longest longevity experimental result in history, there's a web link for you. It's myvitalc.com/exploding human. If they go there, they can find any one of our products. I would recommend the olive oil product. And if they go on subscription, they can save 25%. So even if you just want to try it, go on subscription. You can cancel at any time. Save that 25%. We have a customer service team that has 800 plus 5-star reviews. They are not trained to talk you out of canceling your subscription. Just take advantage of that discount. And there's an additional discount of $15 off if you use the coupon code Exploding Human. And those are kind of the ways that you can reach out, get a hold of the book, get signed up for the Longevity Summit, and try the product if you're interested.
Chris, what a pleasure to see you and talk to you again. And congrats on the summit and all your wonderful success. So what a great thing to be able to talk to these people. Fantastic.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Bob. And thank you for having me on the show. I hope your audience has enjoyed it and is interested in attending the summit. I know you are. And so again, livelongerandbetterbook.com. And there is a link to the summit right there.
All right. Thank you, folks. Thank you, Chris. Have a fantastic day.
Take care, Bob.
Much appreciation for you folks listening to The Exploding Human. I want to thank Chris Burres for being on the show, and check out the Longevity Health Summit. And you can do that once again at livelongerandbetterbook.com. Have a fantastic day. Thank you.